Louis, many thanks for joining us this evening. Take a look at the new appointments at the central bank. But, of course, many are worried. The Ugandan shilling is depreciating against the dollar. What must the two do under their leadership?
All right. The depreciation of the shilling right now could be more due to exogenous factors. So what can the two do? It's really a complicated question to a rather also complicated answer I could give. But what I would think is, given what is happening in the US and the tectonic shifts in the geopolitics, the Trump tariffs and the realignments, the cutting of aid, the inflows, some of the aid inflows are being cut, I think the central bank, the team of the newly appointed governors, if I can use that word, can do only what is within their grasp. For instance, how can they manage price stability? But if the price stability has much to do with exogenous factors, I'm afraid they may have to do more of an advisory role and maybe boost the reserves that we have, because again, we have poorly diversified reserve assets. If you look at our reserve asset portfolio, we have securities, which are US Treasury bonds. We have certain cash deposits in foreign banks. We don't have, I'm hearing of a gold purchase program. So I'm thinking the only way maybe we can, they can try to stabilize the shilling is by doing more of financial engineering, maybe by making our diversifying the reserve assets we have.
I thought you'd point more to fiscal policy management, but the performance of the bank, has it in any way been affected by the absence of the governor in the last 2 years?
To a certain extent, yes, because again, if you look at the corporate governance practices, the proper corporate governance practices we should have, certain decisions should have been taken when the board is properly constituted. So I would argue that yes, the absence has created some bits of uncertainty. Some decisions maybe could have been challenged legally. Right. So yeah, I would think that the absence of the governor, substantive governor, has really hindered the work of the board.
Do you think there's something that they can do to stabilize the economy? Because there's a lot of budget cuts and cut in aid. You said now World Bank and many other things that are yet to come in a couple of years because of the Trump presidency. Do you think that there's a thing or two that they can do to make sure that the impact is not felt as hard as it would have been?
You see, most of our economies are price-taking economies. In other words, we are not so much in control. Our monetary policy might not determine so much of what the interventions they can make, because even the tools at their disposal are very limited. For instance, if you look at the number of banks, rather the banked population, it's very little. So what can they do to maybe stem the kind of shocks we're going to get? I would again go back to how can they manage the reserve, the foreign exchange reserves more adequately, and not just and diversify those assets. Because as we speak right now, given the geopolitical shocks and the counterparty risk, sorry to use that word for our listeners, the counterparty risk that comes with some of the assets in our reserves, I would think that is something they should focus on much more. Maybe now that I'm hearing a gold purchase program, I'm waiting to see how maybe they would implement it to be a more effective tool to stabilize the reserves and manage them, preserve value better.
And the appointments come at the background where, of course, Bank of Uganda is faced with challenges, especially with their internal system. Do you think now that the board is fully constituted, there's a thing or two that needs to be done to strengthen this?
I'm going to make a rather annoying response. You see, the central bank should bite the little it can chew. It should not afford, and I think the governors, the two appointed governors should know that they should only manage the responsibilities they're supposed to manage. I'll give you an example. There is no reason why the central bank should be a fiscal agent of government in issuing government bonds. That's an argument we have made elsewhere. So I'm thinking, again, they can look at how to reform, to regulate the financial sector as a whole. I'll give you an example. Right now, we have very many regulators who are regulating the financial space. For instance, we have UBRA, we have Capital Markets Authority, we have all these, we have Insurance Regulatory Authority. I would think that we create some sort of twin peaks model of financial regulation where the central bank only regulates the banks and monetary policy, and then we fuse all the others, the capital markets, the insurance regulatory authorities, the UBRAs in one. Because as we speak, as a lawyer, you will find that an insurance company gets a license to do asset management, it gets a license to do retirement benefits. So all these reforms and how they can strengthen the internal processes is some of the core they should stick to the core mandate of monetary policy and maybe price stability and regulating the commercial banks. Other things like helping government, being a fiscal agent in government bond market, I think that can really be reformed because they are taking on so much. And I think that compromises the quality of the output.
Right. Lastly, from me, Louis, the central bank has previously been criticized of poorly handling the takeover of the commercial banks and even failure to create an environment where they can thrive, especially the local banks, locally owned. Is there any advice you can give the two leaders of the central bank now?
Again, I'm going to go back to what I hinted on earlier, but in a more detailed way. I have just suggested that we should have what they call a twin peaks mode of financial regulation. Ever since the financial crisis hit in 2008, the central banks are just limiting their role to price stability, regulating the commercial banks, and maybe monetary policy. They're not taking on roles like helping government, being a fiscal agent in the treasury markets. So the more the central bank takes on more than it can chew, that's when we shall see more lapses, like for instance, closing down banks, maybe sometimes in a more, in a less orderly way. Then again, you'll find that the same board that is sitting to determine monetary policy is the same board sitting to determine which bank should be closed. So I'm thinking that the way we regulate our financial sector as a whole should change. Now that we have a new team, they should look at how can we make the central bank focus on price stability, monetary policy, so that they exit things like helping the government issue debt. Because as we speak in Kenya, there's a conversation on should the central bank be a fiscal agent of government in the treasury bond market? And they have answered that question in the negative, no. So I would assume that now, as the new team with Professor Nwagaba and the Governor Tingego, is that they should actually find a way of streamlining what the central bank should do, and they limit what the central bank should focus on, regulating commercial banks, monetary policy, and price stability. Anything beyond that should...
Wouldn't that then require changes or amendments in the law?
Certainly.
If you're to sort of change what the mandate of the central bank is?
Certainly it should, because the way we regulate our financial sector, I would think is long overdue. It's archaic. That is why we are having a lot... I will give you an example. Right now, we are having a lot of, the central bank has very many roles, right, some of which can be really trimmed away. And then, like I said, you have a twin peaks model where you have a prudential authority within the central bank and then a financial sector conducts authority, where the central bank has only the core role. And by the way, managing monetary policy is not a mean feat, it's not a small feat. But when you compound it with all these other things, you kill the efficiency. So as I'm thinking, the amendments are overdue and the team can really present them.